Hello everyone. Today, let's talk about the real estate market in Nanaimo. When you walk down the street, you'll see a lot of real estate agent signs for houses for sale. But are those houses actually sold or not? Are prices going up or down, right? Or is it a seller's market or a buyer's market? So let's take a look today. And finally, we'll talk about what the overall market trend might realistically look like in the upcoming months. We'll certainly touch on that important aspect at the very end. All right, let's get right into the topic. First, let's take a look at the latest data for July. The total number of homes listed was 195 in total. Compared to the same period last year, that's an increase of 3.72%, which means there's just a little bit more inventory, a slight increase in listings. The number of homes sold was 118 compared to 102 during the same period last year. This increase is quite significant. It went up by 15.69%, about 15%, or roughly just under 16%. This shows some rather optimistic signals. Buyers are feeling a bit more optimistic about the market now, and they're becoming more active. The average price should be $826,000 compared to the same period last year. That's an increase of 3.78%. It hasn't dropped or risen much, just a slight increase like this. As of early August, or rather by the end of July and the early hours of August 1st, there were 393 listings on the market. Compared to the same period last year, that's an increase of 4%, meaning there are just a few more listings. So is it a buyer's market or a seller's market? When we calculate it, our month of inventory, that is the inventory level, is 3.3 months. In other words, it's not leaning towards sellers, nor is it leaning toward buyers. Okay, now let's talk about this breakdown. Looking at this data, the highlight is that there are 15% more buyers. So why is there a 15% increase in buyers? Where exactly are these buyers coming from? First, what we can see is that the high interest rate environment, that is the environment of high rates, has actually changed from last year to this year. Last year rates were relatively high, but this year they've already dropped to over 4%, previously over 6%. Around this time last year in June and July, rates gradually decreased. You can see there's a 15% difference between last year and this year. One of the reasons, I think, is exactly this, because the current mortgage interest rates have come down, which in turn gives some first-time home buyers or those looking to buy for their own use a motivation, a sense that, hey, the cost of buying a home is now lower, at least the cost of the mortgage interest rate is lower. The second point is that from 2022 to this year, interest rates were raised to their peak and then started to come down. Throughout this 3-year period in Nanaimo, the average price hasn't increased much, nor has it decreased much. It has basically stayed within the range of just over $800,000. In other words, this is actually quite good. The price range has remained relatively stable. So for buyers, this gives them confidence in the market. All right. Third, we can see that the number of listings hasn't increased by much. In Vancouver or Toronto, for example, you might notice a sudden surge in listings. But in our city of Nanaimo, overall, the annual average has only increased by 2.27%, which is less than 3%. On the other hand, the number of buyers increased by 11.91% over the whole year. The previous figure was a month-over-month comparison, but now we're talking about the entire year. So over the course of the year, while the number of sellers only increased by a little over 2%, the number of buyers actually went up by 11%. What does that mean? It means that buyers' confidence in the Nanaimo market has basically recovered. Yes, the market is bouncing back. Supply has remained steady. On average, it's stable, but the number of buyers increased by 11%. So if we look at it from the perspective of supply and demand and compare them, we would expect prices to be pushed up. But in reality, we haven't seen an upward trend here. Prices have basically stayed at around the 800,000 mark, which is understandable. Why is that? Because there are many uncertainties in the market, such as the issue of tariffs, and some people say inflation will be high, or even that now is not a good time to invest. So these uncertainties make some buyers adopt a more cautious attitude when it comes to making a purchase or buying a home. However, the number of people buying homes, the number of buyers, has actually increased. So for now, there hasn't been a significant rise, but there might be a slight upward push from this force. Why is that? It's actually because behind the scenes, the number of buyers has quietly increased. All right? Okay, so let's take a look at my personal opinion on the short-term outlook. My personal opinion is that as a buyer, August is a relatively slow market. How should I put it? Basically, most local buyers are out traveling since it's vacation season. So the pace of home viewings or the enthusiasm for viewing homes has actually decreased a bit. Most of the people looking at homes now are from out of town, like those visiting from Vancouver, Victoria, or Toronto. They might eventually settle down here, but for now, they're just looking at homes to get a sense of what it's like in Nanaimo. So there are still people viewing homes, but the number of actual purchases might drop a bit. But in September, when people come back for school and work, the number of home viewings will increase a bit and the number of purchases will also go up slightly. So if you're a buyer and you want to take advantage of this opportunity, while there aren't that many buyers, you can look at more properties since there are plenty of listings available. You can start learning about the market and begin viewing homes now. As buyers, what we can see is that the number of listings isn't especially high and hasn't increased much, which is a good sign and good news. More buyers is also good news for you as a seller. But what we're seeing is that even though there are more buyers, why aren't prices going up, right? There are more buyers and sellers haven't raised prices much, but why isn't the average listing price increasing? One reason is that these buyers are very sensitive to the price of the homes. They won't let prices go too high. Even when they see a lot of multiple offers or bidding wars, buyers aren't aggressively pushing prices up. In fact, they're becoming more cautious. Let me give you an example. We had a property on Lambert that we listed at $799,000. The feedback from showings was all negative. People said there was nothing good about the house, nothing at all, so no one made an offer. So many people came to see it, but no one made an offer, right? After seeing this, the seller got anxious and said, all right, let's adjust the price to match the market value, which was $750,000. So we dropped it from $799,000 to $750,000. The feedback had indicated that $750,000 was about right. And we knew that as soon as we lowered it to $750,000, on the very first day, 5 people came to see the house and we got 3 multiple offers. So there was a bidding war. The price didn't go up by much, just pushed a little bit higher. But it's kind of strange, isn't it? So buyers are still cautious about the price. They know that this house is worth around $750,000. This can serve as a reference for everyone. All right, so the last 2 things. First, will housing prices actually go up in the next few months? Personally, I don't think they'll rise that quickly because if you look back over the past 3 years, prices have basically stayed around the low 800,000. So at that price range, whether it's this year, next month, or in 2 months, I haven't seen any signs of prices being pushed up yet. But there are more buyers now, and the number of buyers has increased by over 10%. So there has been some growth. So there is a subtle force here that could potentially drive prices up. When might that happen? Personally, I think it will be when mortgage interest rates come down and when another force, namely investors, enters the market. That's when prices could be pushed higher. So how do you calculate or estimate this? It's when investors want to buy property to make money or to buy homes for rental income. If the timing is right and the numbers add up, then that's when prices can be pushed higher because there will be a lot more buyers. So right now, this group of investors hasn't entered the market yet. It's mostly owner-occupiers who are buying, or it's people with immediate housing needs who are buying. Okay, so this is the main aspect to watch. Lastly, I think we need to pay attention to what happens on September 17th, whether the central bank will raise interest rates, cut them, or do something else. This is also a signal, so let's wait and see in September, which is next month, to find out what the central bank or the government will actually do about this. All right, that's all for our discussion today. We won't go into more detail. If you're interested in learning more about the South Nanaimo market, please feel free to like, share, and contact us. Since you've watched this far, why not give us a like? Your support motivates us to make even better videos. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.